Hello everyone. After the recent Colbert, well, it's time to go back to another classic. In this case, the Tier 8 IJN battleship Amagi. This is probably one of the oldest battleships in the game. This is one of the original, basically, back in the day this game basically had two lines of battleships. The Americans and the IJN. So Amagi goes back a very long time. And sadly, some of this shows in its design and in some of its weaknesses. That does not mean that the ship still doesn't have some strengths to it. Health-wise, 66.3k health, kind of puts it in the middle of the pack. It's better than the French, less than the Russians, I guess, and kind of on par with the Americans. The torpedo bulge used to be the best in the game for tier 8 at 43%, but then they added the premiums Massachusetts and Alabama, which both actually have better torpedo bulges. Still though, 43% is very, very good. The rudder shift is actually the worst among all tier 8s. At 17.3 seconds, it's universally the worst. I think the closest you can get is something like the Tirpitz and Bismarck that have 16 base. Even then though, the turning circle is also among the worst. It's 870 meters. In comparison, the Americans have something like 710 to 760. The Germans have German and French are around 850. So sitting at 870 is almost the worst. The only one that is worse is the Vladivostok at 950. Of course, you have to take all these turning circles that are mentioned in port. You have to take them with a large grain of salt, because as Little White Mouse has proved with all her extensive testing about turning circles, most of them lie. They are completely inaccurate and they don't actually represent the actual turning circles in game. So keep that in mind, take it with a large pinch of salt. Concealment, pretty good, 13.6. It used to be better, it used to be one of the more competitive. Now though, it's kind of fallen off where it's no longer quite as impressive. We see a chopper pushing fairly aggressive behind the island. They have no idea where I am. I'm positioned central, where I want to be. I pop the spotter plane to secure the island. And one thing that the Amagi has is gunpowder. 410mm guns, and with a decent sigma, and they do lose some speed in the air. You can see how they slow down just before landing, and that's the air drag. But even then, you can get some really juicy pot shots off. I think he got a bit fortunate actually detonating, because I think he would have died without the detonation regardless, but he went to port with some flags with him instead. Still though, radar cruiser First Blood got rid of a significant threat from the battlefield. Amagi though, 10 410mm guns, base range of only 19.9, so spotter plane does help you significantly here. 30-second reload, pretty rough turret traverse, among the worst, not quite, but among the worst. I think it's 41.9. There are some worse like INSI, Monarch, Key. These all have 45. So you're almost the worst, but not quite. But nowhere near the Germans at 36 or the French at 36 seconds. So pretty bad turret traverse. Overall though, the guns are decent. I won't go out of my way and say these guns are the most amazing thing you've ever seen. They have a pretty damn high fuse arming threshold of 68mm, which means you tend to get a fair bit of overpens with them as well. You don't have, of course, any improved penetration angles, but in terms of damage, you are competing with the very top tier 8, as long as you can land your volleys. In terms of penetration, Amagi has always ranked fairly high. It used to be, once again, it used to be among the best, but then Vladivostok came, which kind of took the throne, and the Americans have always had slightly better, the NC class, basically the South Dakota and the North Carolinas, they've always had slightly better. But in general, in terms of penetration, Amagi is right there below the Americans and the Soviets. So very usable guns in that sense. Anyway, we've been talking a fair bit about the stats of the ship. You can see my positioning. I'm trying to keep a central position, but actually not getting too close to the opponent. And the reason for this is that there are, well, first of all, you can use the guns at range. And medium to long range is where Amagi's guns are able to shine, thanks to this consistent dispersion. But there's also other reasons. I mentioned that this is an old design from a time, well, from long ago, basically. and it shows in the armor design. The Amagi has 32mm plating all across the board. Everything is 32 basically. Except, of course, the citadel and the turrets, the usual stuff. But you know what I mean when I say everything is 32. It has no special deck plating, it has no special upper belt plating. It's all 32mm, which of course means that HE spammers love shooting the Amagi. They do massive damage because there's no armor to mitigate. There's no amazing Vladivostok plating at 40mm. There's no even North Carolina plating with 38mm to mitigate that. Every single ship, every single HE spammer, especially with IFHE being introduced, which didn't exist back when Amagi came out, is able to penetrate the hell out of the ship, which means you eat a lot of HE damage if you find yourself mispositioning. Overall, the Citadel armor is 254, which sounds probably really low when you consider, for example, the Vladivostok has 370. But that's not entirely true, because the Amagi actually has a turtleback. And it's got, in that sense, it's got layered armor. It's got an outer turtleback that is 254, and then it's got some sloped citadel armor that sits at 95mm of armor. Now, it's not like the German turtleback, which is super incredibly effective at close range and also pretty damn effective at long range. I mean, yes, German battleships do get citadeled occasionally, but it's very much occasionally. The Amagi, on the other hand, if you give broadside at range, you get citadeled consistently. The turtleback simply doesn't work at long range. It only really starts kicking in at closer ranges. This also, what contributes to this is also the fact that your citadel is actually basically right at the waterline. It's very much a waterline citadel, so hitting it at very close ranges is difficult because it's hard to get the plunging fire needed, and because of the turtleback, it's hard to also get the plunging fire and the angle needed to actually penetrate through this. So at very, very close ranges, you can give broadside pretty fearlessly in this thing. Because yes, they will get, of course they will get these huge pens on you, but they will not get the citadel. And in brawling situations, usually it's citadels that decides brawling battles between battleships. So overall, I'm playing a central position. I want to play as central as I can in my battleship because, well, I always say a central position makes your battleship more dangerous to everything on the map, but on the other hand, it also makes everything on the map more dangerous towards you. So you have to keep very, very tight awareness on what's going on the minimap. The reason I can play so aggressive in the center right now is because on the right flank you can see that my team is actually pushing and playing aggressive, so I know that the right flank is being pushed back. That means I only actually have to worry about their spawn and the left flank. And if you look at my angling, you see how I'm angled against their spawn and I'm angled against the left flank. So this is, in the Amagi, as long as you maintain angling, you are pretty damn tanky. There are of course exceptions. Bisashi Amagi, 460mm guns, overmatch 32mm, so the Amagi can get punched through and punished by this overmatch. But in general, as long as you maintain your angling, you're unlikely to eat too many large hits. HE spammers will of course ignore this as well, so in general, medium to long range, especially in the early game, is very much recommended. So and that's exactly what I'm doing here. Note that I make sure I have DDs on both sides. I have a DD on my right, I have a DDs on my left. I can't really be ambushed by torps, I can't really be surprised by them. Also, the DDs have been spotted on the minimap, so I know that there's no big threats on my left. And the right flank is still pushing. They're trading a bit on the ships. We're losing some, they're losing some. But I'm starting to see perhaps an opportunity to play aggressive. And that's what I want to do. I am spotted here, so I am playing very carefully. I know there's a lightning in the cap. You see how my detection extends. I don't think it's Edinburgh because my DD would spot him. So I know there's a lightning in the cap. I kind of want to get rid of him because he's the final linchpin. I want to push in and fight these battleships. But I can't do it as long as this deity is alive. So I'm kind of just gonna bully him. This is force. This is extending force as a battleship. You start pushing towards some ship, they have to give space because they can't take you in a straight up fight. They can torp you, sure, but in a straight up fight they have to give space. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm just inching my way towards him, and this way he's more focused on me, and maybe my DDs will gain some advantages and be able to kill him. I'm pinging on the right, I'm pinging exactly where the lightning is. The lightning pops up exactly where I ping, and surprisingly it's my low HP lightning that decided to go chasing him, so he gets killed. I didn't mention this is of course tier 9 game. You get up tiered pretty frequently in tier 8 ships. It's not as bad as it used to be. It used to be a nightmare, but these days it still happens fairly often. So you have to keep that in mind. The one thing I didn't mention was the AA. The AA is poor. It's IJN AA. It's not Turpid's poor. It's kind of Roma poor. In other words, don't expect much. I mean, AA is already kind of a joke after all the nerfs to AA, but on the Amagi it's even more so. On the bright side though, at least the torpedoes from the carriers wouldn't do quite as much because of your torpedo belt, but rockets, of course, because of your thin armor, kind of do a lot of damage everywhere, so you don't have the best of times against any of these foes. Still though, we do push in. Note that I'm giving flat broadside. I've been so careful to angle this entire time. Now I'm giving flat broadside to the IFHE. I make sure I don't turn my rudder, so I'm going in a straight line. And did you see that? That was not a coincidence that he didn't get any citadels. He got a few pens, but it wasn't really a big deal. And we're now within 9 kilometers, and that's where I start getting very, very confident about my turtleback. Now you want to be careful, of course, that you don't make any hard turns left or right. Because if you make hard turns in your ship when someone is about to shoot you, your ship lists. That's just basic physics. Your ship lists because, well, when you're trying to turn it while the force is going one way. And when you do that, you tend to lift the citadel out of the water on one or the other side, and you tend to change the angle of the turtleback. So you gotta be careful with this. If someone is about to shoot, don't make any full turns. Even a Tirpitz or Bismarck can be citadel, or Grosse Korfors, any of these can be citadel at close range if you make a hard turn while they're shooting. Because your ship lists so much that it lifts the turtleback out of the water, and they can basically shoot you under your skirt and get into the citadel. So it's very important that you see he's about to shoot, you just calmly go in a straight line. If you have a turtleback and you know it's going to work, like I did against the Iowa there. Now though, I'm angled, no reason to eat extra damage here. I know there's an Edinburgh, I'm keeping track of him. He will pop up at some point. He was somewhere behind his island, he hasn't been seen in our spawn, and I know he's the final threat to pushing in and brawling these battleships. The potential of that torpedo volley coming in. And there he finally is. He pops up, it looks like he's going for some sort of YOLO. Instantly aim very, very low on the waterline, and just shoot all the guns. We need to get rid of him. He's the biggest threat we have to deal with right now. I turn in, slow down. If he launched torpedoes, I would assume he launched them right as he came around the corner. And I'm gonna give it a few seconds to see, did he actually get them off? By this time, if he didn't launch the torps earlier, there's no way he would have launched them now, because, well, they would have gone right into the island. So after making sure I'm not eating any unnecessary torps, this is when we start pushing in. I'm angling a fair bit against the Iowa. And I'm also angling a fair bit against the Izumo in their spawn, in case he decides to focus me. But ultimately, my goal is to push in and brawl this guy. Because now we are within that magical range. Well, we've already been in it for some time, but now we can make use of it. And this is late game. Amagi goes from a mid to long range battleship into a very close range devastating brawler in the later game. Once you've gotten rid of these big threats, which are torpedoes and of course HE spam. Once you've gotten rid of these and you get into this juicy close range, that's when you get really, really powerful. I unlock to make sure my turrets don't mess with my aim. I get kinda unfortunate, only one citadel, but I do also break his guns because I aimed underneath his guns. So at this point we're gonna slow down, angle in towards the Jean-Bart, that's of course shooting us. I'm not worried. They can do damage to me, but they're not going to be able to kill me because they cannot get those citadels, whereas I don't have the same fear at all. I calmly slow down, I see his guns turning towards me, there's no panic, I don't think he'll even have time to shoot, and we finish off the Iowa. Next target is of course the Jean-Bart. I'm worried he might go for the ram, he gets a full volley into my broadside. Once again, no citadels. That Amagi turtleback being used to its full extent in this brawl. I'm turning out for two reasons. First of all, I want to get my back guns on him faster, and by turning out, I make it so. And also, I want to make sure that Izumo can't finish us off, because I know we're going to be fairly low on health. He does get one more volley off. Once again, no citadel. I angle a bit so my armor bounces or shatters some of it, and we only end up eating 8k damage. Still though, the Izumo could finish us off, so we'll try to get behind this island where we can get undetected. And the Izumo isn't focused on us because he's got his hands full, so obviously this is our chance to try to secure our Kraken. He turns out. Just we waited for him to turn, of course, before we shot, because that's the easiest way to get the pins. And not surprisingly, we get the kill. We secure the Kraken just as the game perfectly ends, as if scripted. So the game ends 222,000 damage. And if anything, this game showed the many aspects of the Amagi. Amagi is one of those few ships as the game goes on, the closer range you fight. Now, the one thing I didn't actually showcase this game is because you're an IJN battleship, the IJN HE is actually pretty good. So if you're dealing with nose-in ships, like we're saying Musashi, Yamato, hell, even Kremlin, if you're dealing with these ships that like to angle in, don't be afraid to just switch to your HE. The HE pen is 68mm, but the DPM is actually pretty decent. I think it's almost the highest. In fact, your HE DPM is 130,000. Now, that might not sound so special, but then you consider that the Monarch, literally the Royal Navy HE spammer line, has an HE DPM of 136. You only have 6k DPM less. And your fire chance is 30%. Your fire starting capacity isn't maybe that high, but because of this hard-hitting HE in combination with the fires, your HE is actually fairly effective at burning these battleships when they try to push in. So don't be afraid to use it if you're dealing with angled targets. So that's something to keep in mind. I could have used it maybe on angled IVR or whatever. Once again, any angled battleship you can burn to death if it comes to that. But in general, I wanted to keep AP loaded because the threat of the Edinburgh. Having HE loaded and an Edinburgh pops up and then you don't get the kill, yeah, that's not a fun time. So I played it safe in that sense. But that doesn't mean you should underestimate the HE. It is really quite decent. The HE Alpha is 6.5k. Which actually puts it above Monarch's 6.3k alpha and above Vanguard's 6.3k HE alpha. So the hardest hitting HE at tier 8 for a battleship. So keep that in mind, don't be afraid to use it, it can be very, very strong. Still, devastating strike, we got the Chapav, Confederate, First Blood, Kraken, High Caliber. All the damage rewards. Sadly, no tankiness rewards, which is maybe a bit surprising, but that's because we didn't really get maybe to heal that much in the later stages of the game. I would have kind of expected to get a Dreadnought because we went so very low in this game. Regardless, team score 2.8k in a tier 9 game. That's pretty nice. A carrier would have, of course, complicated the matters significantly. Well, maybe not that significantly because I was constantly surrounded by teammates. But in general, this was an example of the way the positioning of the Amagi changes as a game goes on if you want to utilize all the advantages. A common mistake you see in the Amagi is they play too safe, which means they don't get to use the advantages of that turtleback at close range, or alternatively they play too aggressive in the early game. And you can't play aggressive if there's a Haraguma or a Wooster behind an island, or even in this case like the Azuma. If the Azuma was still alive and spamming me, he would do full HE volleys every single reload on my armor. Or just torpedoes. Yes, you got a good torpedo belt, that doesn't mean you want to be eating those torps. So it comes down to timing, and that's why Amagi has always been a challenging ship to play. It's got obvious weaknesses, but it's also got these fairly niche, unique strengths, which most people don't know about. So this was, in that sense, I actually like this game because I really got to showcase how good that turtleback can be when you put it to its full use. And finally, detailed report. We only ate 81k damage. I don't think that's quite enough to get... I think it's barely not enough to get the Dreadnought reward. Unfortunate. Still though, 81 shells, some secondary fires on top. Only a 15-minute or 16-minute game, so not quite the full duration. 1.4 million potential, not as much as it could be, but overall a good example of what the Amagi can do. Anyway, let me show you guys my recommended build for this ship. Right, before I kick off, let me remind you by selling out my Instagram and my Discord and my Twitter. Whatever else, they're in the comment below, so feel free to check those out if you are the least bit interested in any of the social media. Anyway, and on the Discord, we're actually going to implement the bot soon where you can find all the builds on demand to make life easier. That's still a work in progress though, so not quite there yet, but it's in the plans to make the Discord more usable for basically all of you, because there's like over 10k of you, 12k, a ridiculous number. Regardless. Modules. Actually, I think you go hull first on this thing. The range is incredibly useful, but the hull upgrade is just so considerable, mostly because you get the maneuverability buff, you get the speed buff. It's just, there's too much there to not like. The AA is fine. Did they even buff the guns on it? Really? What did they buff? Oh, you actually even got this. Yeah, there's, well, considering you need to get it to get the range mod, that's really what it comes down to, and engine isn't nearly as important because the Amagi is pretty fast by default. So hull, range, engine, simple progression. Consumable wise, premium damage con, premium repair party. This is something that it just pays itself back because your game quality will be so much better not having to wait ages for these things to come up. Upgrade wise, turret survival, followed by additional tankiness, followed by better dispersion, followed by even more tankiness. I mentioned this, you are a premium juicy HE target. Everyone knows this. I mean, 32mm all across the board means everyone wants to spam you. Every HE spammer look out there sees, oh, an Amagi, let's get some free damage, and then they shoot at you. So you're gonna be set on fire consistently, all the time throughout games. So reducing it by 15% is very much needed. And finally, concealment, because your concealment is pretty okay, so you might as well work around it. And also, if you are getting HE spammed, it aids you in disengaging because you can go dark, which is quite important. Captain build wise, priority number 1 should be priority target. No surprise there. You can, considering the turret traverse with expert marksman is, well, this is with expert marksman. Do we, I think I'll leave this up to you. I would perhaps, personally, I'd probably go AR first, but you can go expert marksman as well if you find yourself being frustrated. The 42-second turret traverse is kind of painful to deal with, so this gives you comfort, this gives you additional damage late game. Both are great. Ultimately, you do want to get both at some point. Follow it up with superintendent. Fire prevention first. In the past, I always said get concealment expert first, but a lot of things have changed. Mostly concealment expert has gotten nerfed, so it no longer gives you 14%, but 10%. This happened a while back. And there's carriers with fires on demand in the forms of bomber planes and rockets and all this stuff. So there's so much more dot damage coming in. So these days, I prefer getting fire prevention first. Once you have fire prevention, and of course, there's all these new disgusting HE spammers like Smolensk. So fire prevention aids you in surviving. So build it first, and then as soon as you can, you build concealment expert. Pick expert marksman or AR, depending on which one you pick first. Pick the second one now. Then build expert loader. I did mention the HE is very, very good and hits very hard at 6.5k alpha. I mentioned this is good, and I mean this is good. If we look at Monarch HE, you see it's actually 6.3k. So that Amagi 6.5k is no joke. You are shooting Royal Navy HE at them, basically. Well, stronger than Royal Navy HE, with a less fire chance, but still, it hits like a truck. And after that, jack of all trade. Faster consumables, faster spotter plane, faster damage con, faster heal. All things you really, really enjoy having. Flag-wise, it's pretty straightforward in the sense that you want to get, you start with the reductions. You get reduction in fire, you get reduction in flooding, you get improved healing. These three are the bread and butter of pretty much every single battleship build out there. After that, well, I'm running detonation flags because I wanted to make a commentary, so I didn't want to unfortunately detonate. But in general, detonations for battleships happen quite rarely, so not really needed. Save it for the DDs. Speed flag, it's nice. Faster consumables, also very nice. And buffed AA, quite useful. I don't run the secondary flag because, well, sadly the secondaries, well, they're not going to win any prizes because the range is so very, very limiting. You can buff them if you want. I mean, it's not a bad flag, it's just that Amagi doesn't gain too much of a bonus because they are percentage-based bonuses, and when the base stat is low, adding a small percentage on top of that isn't going to change much. Still though, that was my Amagi commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Going over some of these older classics soon. Would you like to see the Izuma next? I could probably cover the Izuma next if someone wants. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will talk to you guys later.